some of the stuff that shapes you into who you are today, most of the stuff that shapes you into who you are today is behind the scenes. Most of your triumphs, most of your traumas, most of that stuff's behind the scenes.
The inner work that's done behind the scenes that no one can see, even though you can't connect it to that new car or that new home or that great relationship, it is connected.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another episode of Next Level University, where we teach you how to level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. We hope you enjoyed our latest episode. It was episode number 1334. Not everyone deserves to know your goals. If you missed that one, make sure you check that one out because I believe that was a very, very, very good episode. Today, for episode number 1335, happy Saturday, some of the most important things you do will never be seen. Question I got recently was, what is one of the hardest trials or tribulations you had? And I said, it's interesting because it might not seem like it, but for reference, I grew up without my father. I didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad until I was 27. And meeting my dad at 27 was one of the most challenging things I ever did. I'll never forget, I was sitting on my recliner. I lived 10 minutes from where I live today. I was at home on the weekend, and I was going through Facebook. And I didn't realize that Facebook had a folder for messages that were from people you weren't friends with. So I was going through this folder for whatever reason, and I ended up seeing this message, and all you can see is the first line. And it said, "Hey, Kev, I'm blank. I'm your father's girlfriend." And I remember throwing my phone on the ground and being like, no, not doing this today. It's the weekend. I ain't about this. But then I picked up my phone and I opened the message and I read the message. And I don't remember the exact, I could probably pull it up and read it, but it was basically like, "Hey, Kev, I'm blank. I'm your father's girlfriend. He wants me to let you know that he's been seeing what you're doing on social media. He is very proud of you. And if you would like the opportunity to meet, he would like that very much." And I remember texting one of my friends, letting them know, "Hey, I got this message from my dad," pretty much. And my friend said, "Do you want me to, first of all, are you going to go meet him? Second of all, if you do you want me to come with you?" And I was like, yeah, I feel like I have to. I feel like this is one of those things that this has controlled my life in so many ways, like so many ways that I don't even realize. This is something I have to do. And this is probably the most courageous thing I'll ever do. And I said, as part of that, no, this is something I have to do alone. So I end up saying yes. We set a date. We meet halfway between where we live. And I've told this story on the podcast before, but I think it's important just to give the whole thing. I go to a diner. So it's Miss Menden Diner, right?
Mm-hmm. Been
15, there. Yeah, 15 minutes from where you
Pretty
and I
good.
grew up. Yeah, it's
Pretty
good food. Good food.
Yeah.
And I remember walking in, sitting down, thinking to myself, I have no idea what my dad even looks like. So when he gets here, I don't know. He must know what I look like because he saw me on Facebook. I don't know what he looks like. This is going to be really weird. I see a man walk by one of the windows in the diner, and I was like, oh, that's my dad. I don't know how I knew, but just intuitively, I was like, that's my dad.
So he like Kev? He look like you?
No, he doesn't look anything like me. No. I've gotten comments that we have very similar eyes. I'll take that for what it's worth. But other than that, I don't think we look that similar. Not his age now, maybe when he was younger. But he comes in, he sits down, and it's as weird as you can imagine. And we start talking, and it's like, what are you up to? And just the weirdest conversation you can imagine. Like, there's no similar core values, similar core beliefs, similar core aspirations. There's nothing. We don't know each other at all, but we're supposed to know each other at this super deep level. So then we end up getting into like some more personal stuff. And there's a couple times where he was crying, and I was like, you're not going to get any emotional reaction from me. I'm just here. I'm probably going to be cold. I'm going to be nice, but you're not going to see any of this heart I've hidden away for so long. And I had this important shift during it where I realized that my dad is just a man who has his own weaknesses. He has his own failures. He has his own mistakes. He has his own wins too. But he's just somebody who doesn't have a very high self-improvement set point. I am way more aware of myself, and I have worked way harder on myself than my dad has. And this was when I was 27. And that was one of those things that like freed me in this interesting way where I understood I gave so much power to somebody who didn't deserve any power. Just based on who he was as a human, it's like, you're not even worthy of the power I'm giving you. So the best thing I can do is to relieve you of this power by saying, you know what, I'm good with this. I forgive you. And that was just my choice. And then deciding what I wanted to do next. And I ended up seeing my dad a couple times after that. And then I just realized, look, this is never going to be the relationship that you expect. And I'm just going to be constantly letting you down, because it's very hard to fit somebody into your life when they're supposed to have a certain puzzle piece, but they're never really going to be that. But looking back, and I was talking about this on the podcast I was on recently, I said that was one of the hardest things I have ever done. It was one of the most important things I've ever done, but it is one of the most invisible things that I've never done or ever done. Nobody would know. If I didn't tell you, you'd never know. If I didn't bring it up or if I didn't say it publicly, nobody would ever know. If I didn't reflect on it to realize how important it was, I probably wouldn't know. And it's just a really good example of one of those internal things that really, really needs to shift in order for us to break free of whatever is holding us back. And that's kind of what this episode is in a nutshell. Me being on this microphone right now is not super challenging. Me doing episode 1 was hard, but not as hard as that. No way. It wasn't as hard as that. Or some of the awarenesses that I've gotten behind the scenes, or some of the awarenesses Alan has gotten behind the scenes. That's the hard stuff. Some of the stuff that shapes you into who you are today, most of the stuff that shapes you into who you are today is behind the scenes. Most of your triumphs, most of your traumas, most of that stuff's behind the scenes. So that's kind of the goal of this episode today, is just to at least give you an opportunity to reflect on that type of stuff, right? The stuff that nobody else will ever see, but has shaped you into the human that you are today.
Kev, 2 questions. The first one is, can you describe for our listeners what a personal development set point is? The second one, well, I'll ask the second one after.
Yeah, Tim, I think you've asked me this before, and I don't think I had a really good answer. Personal development set point is the amount of effort one has put into their own self-improvement. It's the level that they understand themselves. It's the work that they've done on themselves. It's the amount of knowledge they have taken in from books or, whatever external stuff. It's just, how much have you poured into evolving the human being that you are? How much work have you done on self, right? There's a show called Home Improvement where they focus on fixing homes. Self-improvement set point is your ability to improve thyself.
Fire. Second question is, what do you think would be different? And this is very difficult. Some of the most important work that you can do on yourself or in the world changes you and shapes you into the man or woman you are. What I find interesting is that it's very hard to correlate those types of things to outcomes. So, for example, if you had never done that, what would be different? And the answer is you don't know, but you can guess.
One, you and I wouldn't be as close because I've told you that behind the scenes of like, hey, a lot happened for me when I revisited people from my past. I think that would benefit you. That's one for sure.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be as good of a husband because I wouldn't understand myself. Like seeing my dad allowed me to like not be angry about it anymore. I mean, 27 years of anger. Obviously, I didn't know when I was little, but 27 years of anger and then seeing like, oh, you're the one who I gave so much power to, but you didn't really deserve it. Like you have your own failures and your own mistake. Like you didn't mean, and again, this is also a fine line too, right? Because I guess you can over allow, there's a lot of ways you can go. But for me, it was like, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. Like you didn't wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to try to screw this kid's life up. Like that's not what you did. That wasn't the goal. So I think for me, it allowed me to have empathy, to practice empathy. It allowed me to have pride in the way that I turned out. And I just think it allowed me to be a better person because that was the biggest wound. I mean, I would say that's the biggest wound I had. So it allowed me to kind of like close off that wound and say, all right, this is kind of finished now. Like I don't think about it anymore. Like, I don't know, I won't say ever, but very rarely do I think about, I'm not mad, I'm not angry, I don't hold any anger. I'm done with it. Like that's gone. And that
what
was
it
just
like before?
I hated my dad. I hated I used to say I will go to his funeral to pee on his grave. That's what I used to say. And I was angry. I was an angry kid who assumed it was my fault. Just that's illogical. It's emotional. I was a baby, right? Like obviously I didn't have any choice in that or probably any impact. But yeah, I was very angry because I felt like, I think that's where most of my not enoughness came from, was like abandonment early in life. And I think that's where but here's the other thing too. How many positives came from that? I don't know. Would I be able to appreciate the positives if I didn't become aware of the negatives and then see the negatives and realize, interesting. Like this all stems from one person. You know, I think for me, it was a very, I mean, you know, obviously your relationship was different, right? Your father wasn't there for a different reason, not one by choice. But at least I had the opportunity to see. You know, I had the choice. And I know a lot of people don't have that. So I think that was part of it for me too.
How do you know? Well, we did an episode recently, Kev, on your deepest fear also creates your deepest desires.
Yeah.
And so for Kev, there was a lot of scarcity, and I don't want to say a ton, but there was some scarcity around money growing up. It's fair. Mm-hmm. Same with me. And you associate a lot of pain to not having money. And so your goals and dreams have a lot to do with wealth. And so I think that our desires, we're all living in between fear and desire. Deepest fear is, snapping turtles, and my desire is to never, ever swim with snapping turtles. Like, obviously it's a joke, but that's kind of what we're all doing. And so if I want to change someone's direction, I have to identify their deepest fear. And then I have to help them change their relationship with that fear. And then I have to get them to create a bigger fear, which is not maximizing their potential or staying stuck forever or staying in a relationship that's unfulfilling. Like, that's really what you do when you really want to shift someone's life. That's why the car accident changed me so much, is because my deepest fear became regret instead of not fitting in. And so that shifted everything. When you were growing up, Kev, why were you so angry at your dad?
I think it's just one of those, like, I didn't know what else to feel. Really. It's like, yeah, I think it's, part of it was I felt so different than everybody else. Because everybody I knew had families. Really. Right? Like, all my close friends had moms and dads, and they had good relationships with their families for the most part. But I don't know. I don't know if it's just something like inherent in the fact that when somebody is gone, when somebody abandons you, you get mad about it.
You just, as a little boy, wanted a dad?
Yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah. I like it. One of my favorite movies ever. It's a joke, Taryn. It's a running joke for Taryn and I. Jingle All the Way. Have you seen that movie?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like that. I'd love to have a dad like that. That'd be awesome. Imagine if Arnold Schwarzenegger was your dad. Obviously, maybe not later in life because he's done some questionable things, but we've all done questionable things. But yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah. Of course. That was hard, like playing sports. Yeah, I didn't have anybody to teach me how to play sports, really. My mom tried, but I didn't really have that. That was hard. And like, I enjoyed sports. That was a challenge for sure. Yeah.
Feeling different?
Definitely.
And then when you get older, you realize that the differences are actually a good thing?
Potentially, yeah.
What a trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a different way I wanted to go with this episode, but I also understand why this is the feels. Some of the most important things you do will never be seen. I hadn't really planned on this, but Kev kind of alluded to it. So for those of you who are newer listeners, my father passed away when I was 2 years old. I had a stepfather from 3 to 14. And then 14, my stepdad left. And we went from like fairly well off financially, 90s and early 2000s, to like completely broke, basically. And I went from what college do you want to try to go to I don't know if I'm going to be able to go to college. And I became the man of the house, for lack of better phrasing, at 14, whatever that means to you or to me at the time. I'm not sure I ever knew what it really meant. But I did know that, like, I wanted to make sure my family made it, whatever that meant. And again, all of this is just in my 14-year-old brain. I didn't understand any of it at the time in hindsight. But so I just worked and tried to do better. And there's 1,000 things in between that I don't even want to get into. But what I will share is that I eventually came to the realization, Kevin and I used to spend every Father's Day together. And now we host an event on Father's Day for children with single parents. So children with single parents. And it's actually coming up on Father's Day in like 40 days or something crazy like that. Mm-hmm. So we got to get it together. But before that, it was Kevin and I just fishing and or talking or podcasting or whatever, because everyone else was with their dads and we weren't, And I remember him telling me that story that you all just heard. And I remember thinking, like, this doesn't affect me. And I don't think I care that much about my stepdad. I think most of my traumas were from my dad's car accident. And more importantly, the repercussions that did with my family. And I'm sure my sister has her perspective. I'm sure my mom has her perspective. I'm sure Steve has his perspective, my stepdad. And I take nothing from their perspectives. But from my perspective, it caused a lot of pain that never really went away, and it caused a lot of trauma that I think some of us didn't really deal with in positive ways. And I'll just keep talking high level.
Bonnie here. I just wanted to share my experience with group coaching and some of the things that I got out of it. So going into group coaching, I was not tracking any habits at all. And so now some of them have become habits. I'm happy to say I wake up, I have a glass of water without even thinking about it anymore. So now I think it's probably time to gear up. I highly encourage people to jump into group coaching. There's so much information. And so stick with it and carry on, and your life will be better for it.
But eventually it got to the point where Emilia thought that my stepdad's relationship with me affected me more than I thought. Kevin agreed, and so eventually it's like, okay. And so I remember I had messaged him, I think in my mid-20s, and we had this conversation back and forth. We were supposed to hang out, and then that didn't end up happening. He was going to get back to me. He was going on a trip or something. And even that is like, okay, that makes sense that he didn't get back to me. Because I remember there was a little time there where when he left, we would still like hang out a little bit, but that fizzled out pretty quickly. And I don't know if he ever wanted kids, and it, I don't think he ever really cared that much about us. And again, that's just my perspective. But at the end of the day, I knew that I needed to go potentially see him like Kevin did with his dad. And so what I did instead was I messaged him on Facebook, and I just said, and he still hasn't read it. I actually checked right while you were talking. So I checked my Facebook Messenger to see if he saw it, and he didn't, I don't think, even though he did change his profile picture. So maybe he has seen it and just not responded. I don't know. Although usually it says seen, I think, on Facebook.
2 blue checks.
2 blue checks. So either way, I do know that prior to sending that message, I was avoiding it. And I also was avoiding getting a therapist for a while too. And I think part of the reason I was avoiding getting a therapist is because I was waiting for this one specific therapist that I now work with that went to my school, WPI. She's amazing. But I think the other part was just I was avoiding it in general. But I'm not sure which is which, or both, or whatever. What I do know is that when you face a fear inside here, everything out there gets easier. It gets different. I don't know if easier is the right word. I don't like the word easier because nothing in life is easy, in my opinion. But I remember after I sent the Facebook message, even if he doesn't respond, I know I'm different. I can tell I'm different. It's like I've faced something in here. So regardless of what happens out there, I know that I'm bigger. I'm different. I'm more empowered. So you hear people say, take your power back. Like what they really mean is become more empowered, AKA face your deepest fears. And we have all these stories we tell ourselves of, well, I don't think that really affected me that much, or blah, blah, blah. And honestly, I think a lot of those are stories. I think you got to do your own work. You maybe get a therapist, whatever. But you got to try to figure out these things are affecting you more than you think. And so the last piece I'll share is on a call with my therapist, we went back to a time in my life where I was a little boy and I felt a lot of things about wanting to go fishing and not having a dad and stuff like that. And I was bawling my eyes out on this therapy call. And I remember thinking like, holy crap. So like all of that is in here, but yet it doesn't bubble up. It's like a volcano that is just a mountain and you don't see that it's a volcano. You don't know that it's a volcano. It's got lava in under the earth and eventually it's going to explode if you don't proactively try to let it ooze out. And I think tears are the volcano oozing out rather than exploding and taking the island. And I think that a lot of people don't deal with the lava underneath the rocks and then they explode on people, which causes even more shame and even more trauma, and it gets even worse, and then it perpetuates the cycle instead of breaking the cycle, which is facing it proactively. So I have one movie in particular that's super triggering. I purposely watched it so that I could work through this stuff. I've also given homework assignments of certain movies for certain people that I know it will unlock some of the stuff. And so the last piece here, I know it was long. I said this to Kev before this episode. The real point, some of the most important things you will do will be behind the scenes, never seen. When you do face fears behind the scenes that are genuine fears, I'm not talking like, oh yeah, I'm kind of scared of this, I'm afraid to get rejected. Like, I'm talking like shaking before you send the text. I'm talking things you didn't even know you were afraid of until you step next to that ledge and then you're like, nope, no. Mm-mm. And when you do actually take that leap of faith, when your inner self grows, the outer world responds to you differently and then you can achieve more. It's like this interesting thing. And I know a lot of people who their inner development is smaller than their outer results. And I'm telling you, that's a scarce place to be. Mm. When your inner development is smaller than your outer results, you have to play scared. You have to hang on to status and perception. When your inner development is bigger than your results, now you're playing with house money. Now you're more than your outer results indicate. Now I want your inner development to exceed your outer results, knowing that the outer results will eventually catch up. And I think, Kev, you've talked about this with people who have been really famous and successful and they've ended up committing suicide. And our theory, again, we don't know this for sure, but our theory is sometimes their outer results exceeded their inner development so far that they felt so scared because they didn't know how to hang on to it or how to handle it or whatever. And so they were in scarcity. And I think that if you can flip that script, that's what we're recommending here, which is just the inner work that's done behind the scenes that no one can see, even though you can't connect it to that new car or that new home or that great relationship, it is connected.
I always say the inner state and the internal state and external state are too far apart. They're too different. So that's why it's like, here's the thing, right? What would be different if I didn't go do that? Just as an example, I might have every single thing I ever want in 20 years, but still be miserable and not know why. That's something like that, because my internal state of having the opportunity to close that portal, it never happened. That's a really, I think a lot of people, because here's what happens. You think external results will fix internal problems. Not true. It doesn't work that way. Fixing,
if anything, it amplifies it.
I
sometimes.
think so, because I say this on interviews all the time. It's like, I go out and get drunk. That key doesn't open the lock. I go out and get high. That doesn't open the lock. I get a beautiful partner. That doesn't open the lock. I get my dream car. That doesn't open the lock. I get the body of my dreams. That doesn't open the lock. Well, maybe if I make 6 figures, that will. No, that doesn't open the lock either. Now what? Now I've found
who we're talking about.
Right.
That's Kev. For the listeners, that was Kev describing Kev.
Oh, yeah. What did you think it was? No,
I did. I just don't know if the listeners know that was you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that. And then one day you're like, you have some sort of moment where it's like, what is it about me? Like, what's this internal stuff that I'm trying to beat with all this external stuff? That. And I think that's where a lot of us, but to your point, what's a good analogy? I don't have a good analogy for it, but there's something inside of you that needs to be set free for any of that really to matter. I don't think the external stuff ever will truly matter until the internal state is aligned, or whatever it means to you. Whatever it means to you. But I think the reason a lot of us, and we were saying this too, some people will tell you like it's all internal. Like make sure you're aligned and make sure you're fulfilled and you'll get all your goals. Other people are saying like it's all external. Wake up, do the same thing every single day for the next 50 years and you'll be successful. Grind your face off. The truth is somewhere in the middle. I mean, if you really want to have like the most holistically successful life, you have to do both. It's internal 100%. And external, right? Everything is. The inside of your house can be amazing, but if the outside of your house is not amazing, it's not going to sell for the price you want it to, whatever, vice versa. I know this is a heavy episode. To wrap it up with a little funny at the end. The second time I went and saw my dad, I went to his house. I'm getting ready to leave. He's like, "Hey, Kev, you want some weed?" And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I got some weed. You want me to give you some?" So he gave me a bushel of weed to take home with me. So the only present I ever get from my father was weed. So I thought that'd be a good way to wrap it up. And again, at this point in my life, I don't speak to my dad. I haven't spoken to my dad, I don't know, a year, 2 years. I don't hold any negativity. Transparently, one of the reasons I stopped talking to my dad is because I knew I didn't want to keep disappointing him. I knew, look, and again, no ego in this. I'm just not the type of person you can call Thursday at 11 o'clock in the morning and then say, "Hey, call me back." Like I got stuff going on. I am not answering my phone. I don't even know where my phone is. My phone's over here. Like that's just, so I decided it wasn't worth trying to put in the effort to have a quote unquote normal relationship. It's just, you don't understand. You couldn't possibly understand what I'm doing. And there's just way too much of a bridge to repair. So I don't hold any negativity. I don't feel like it's running me anymore. I feel like I've closed that off, but I also don't speak to my dad anymore either.
How does someone free themselves?
Face the thing that you're most afraid to face. Now, and I'll say this too, make sure you have adequate support too, right? Like Alan as a therapist, I think that's huge, especially for stuff like that. Like when you're opening up some of these closets, there's a lot of stuff in there that might hurt. So make sure you're not doing it alone is what I would say. I was in a very balanced place at that point where I was good, but I know like if it's a trauma or a trigger or it's something like deeper, that I think it probably would benefit somebody to get a therapist, get a counselor.
Definitely.
That's what I would say.
The therapist thing is so powerful because you have legal and moral privacy. There's a confidentiality that comes with it. You know, my coaching has that confidentiality too, but it's not therapy, it's coaching. Coaching is aspirational. Therapy is much more about the past and healing the past. And again, both have both, but there's something about having someone who's a professional who understands that stuff and who has been doing this work where they can recognize things that you can't, and you can express openly where you don't have to express anything perfectly. It's their job to not hang on to any one thing you said imperfectly. Whereas in intimate relationships or with friendships, there's always a little bit more risk when you say something wrong or imperfect or whatever. It's a very, very judgment-free private place that I think everyone should express. Seriously, I think everyone should have a therapist personally. But again, I didn't get one for 33 years, so I understand if you're avoiding it. I definitely was unconsciously avoiding it without knowing why.
Understandable. I'm excited. I don't have one right now. I haven't in a minute, but I am excited. I genuinely am. Because I know I'll learn about myself. That's always good. My relationship will improve. Everything will improve. Here's the other thing. I also am at the age and maturity level where I understand it's not a weakness. Where I know a lot of people, it's like, I should know myself. No. you're going to know yourself at a deeper level. It'll be beneficial for sure.
Yeah. That I had that too. Of like, well, I shouldn't need one. I can do it myself. All of that is just ridiculous, because it's like that's like an athlete being like, you know what, I don't need a coach.
No.
It's like, well, you would benefit from one. You're not going to win the Super Bowl without a head coach. You're not going to win a Super Bowl without a physical therapist, without, there's a defensive coach, an offensive coach, a head coach, a physical therapist, a personal trainer. They have these people there that this is all they do. You've been to the physical therapist lately, and it's game changer.
Yeah, it's the best.
Therapist is the same way. That's why it's called therapist.
That's
Physical therapist, emotional therapist, mental health, coaching. It's all super valuable. Obviously, we're advocates of it because we are coaches, but coaches need coaches. Coaches need therapists. Emilia calls it a board of advisors. Just have a board of advisors. Your intimate partner should be on there. Your closest friends should be on there. You should have a therapist. You should have a coach. I have some people in my life that have all of the above, and they are just crushing it. They're just crushing it. How could they not? They have so much. When you surround yourself with these incredible board of advisors, you're going to win. Very last thing I say, I promise. Board of advisors, there's something on every company called a board of directors. Companies don't succeed when they have a bad board of directors. They never do. The board of directors is the guide of the company. Like Apple has a magnificent board of directors. Otherwise, they would not be so successful. We have our own board of directors at NLU. We don't call it that, but the chief officers, we're trying to learn from each other, and we give each other feedback. Hey, what's your most important win for the week? What's your most important improvement? We're all in this together, and we're all doing it privately in a safe place where we actually want to get better. We're not trying to shit on each other.
Alan used the words judgment-free zone. If you are looking for a judgment-free place to be yourself, to feel like you belong, to learn, to grow, to meet other people, please join our private Facebook group, Next Level Nation. Link will be in the show notes.
So we've been talking about this for a while. The blog is here, the Next Level blog. May 24th, we are going to be sending a email to the entire mailing list. And then from that moment on, May 24th, you heard it here first. From May 24th on, every other week, there will be a blog. The blog is going to be a very simple but powerful read, anywhere from 5 to 10 minute read, maybe a little bit more than that, depending on the blog. But it's going to be taking the very best things that Kevin and I have learned on this podcast and then condensing it. I'll give you one small example. On May 24th, there's something, I think the name of the blog is How to Express Uncomfortable Truths. And it's about the truth dial. It's just like a light dimmer. You dial it up and your light shines brighter, but remember, some people are going to react negatively and they're going to filter out, and then other people are going to be attracted in. The truth dial, that's one concept. So every other week, you'll get a nice read sent to your inbox. If you want in, please email me, alan@nextleveluniverse.com. We'll add you with your email onto the mailing list.
Next Level Nation tomorrow for episode number 1336. It'll be a lighter episode, I believe. Are your own timelines holding you back? I'm very excited for that one. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. Grateful for each and every one of you. And at NLU, we do not have fans. We have family. We will talk to you all tomorrow.
Keep doing the hard things behind the scenes when no one's watching. Next Level Nation.